If you're like me, you probably hate being judged, and yet, who wants to be taken for a ride? So, how do we balance it? Welcome back. I'm Gila Ross, author of Living Beautifully and host of the Power Up podcast, where we share short, relatable ideas to impact and upgrade your everyday life. Is there anything wrong with fear?
A little bit of fear is good.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Like otherwise you would take too much risk. So having a little fear of consequences is good.
Okay, is there any downside to fear?
It ruins happiness if it's too much. A little is really healthy.
Let me ask you another question. It's slightly different, but you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute, right? So fear can hold us back from doing things, right? So how do we achieve our goals or our aims when we have things in our environment that are holding us back? Those barriers can be anything. They could be internal, they could be external, it could be fear, it could be something else, right? How do we overcome that?
Have confidence to know that you'll be okay either way.
Okay. Confidence is almost like the opposite of fear.
I had a really bad flight when it was dropping and all that. And then I did get a fear. But then I went and learned with the United psychiatrists that helped. They had a fear of flying program and learned about everything, like why it does that. And it doesn't mean you're going to fall out. And it's like a bumpy road. And so learning about all of the fear and stuff made it go away to understand rationally.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say the fear of having an uncomfortable conversation, right? If I bring up something that's bothering me with someone else, right? Like, we don't know what the reaction is going to be. The person might listen, the person might like say, no, that's it, I'm done. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. And not having those conversations has a cost as well.
Right.
So Lisa told us that one way of overcoming the fear is by learning and understanding more what goes behind things. Anything else?
You have to be in a place where you could...
Willing to accept the consequences, yeah, whatever they may be. It's being confident that it's worthwhile talking no matter what the result is, right? I'm confident that we need to discuss this, even if it means worst case scenario that the relationship ends over it, right? Like someone shared with me, right? Like where she was in a relationship with someone and the other person wasn't respecting her boundaries, and it's coming to a place where you realize that there's something not right in the relationship that needs to be fixed, and if the other person can't respect that this needs to be fixed and we need to discuss that, then the cost of not talking becomes more than the cost of talking. Even if the cost of talking is a big cost. There's always a cost, right? There's a cost. The cost of talking, we don't know what the cost of talking is. It could be the cost of talking will be nothing. It could be the cost of talking will be the relationship. We get to a point where taking the risk is worthwhile because the cost of not taking the risk is too high. Let's just say this person decides I'm going to talk to this person about the relationship because I don't want to be in a relationship that's inauthentic. Even if the result of me talking to this person, they will be upset with me and say, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. But that is a risk that I'm willing to take because the cost of not saying anything is too high, is higher than that. There's that fear of the unknown that stops us from doing what we think we should do. And how do we overcome that? So what I want us to look at is a couple of stories in the Torah where fear plays a big part. And I think it'll help us understand a little bit more about fear and how to overcome it. So the first story is that there's an interesting wording in the Torah. Esau sells the birthright. Esau was the oldest of the two. And Jacob, one day he comes home from the field. He's very hungry. And Jacob was making a bowl of soup for his father, who was in mourning for his grandfather. Abraham had just died. Isaac was in mourning. So Esau says to him, I'm starving, pour that soup down my throat, right? Not the most refined thing to say, but that's what he says. What does Jacob says? He says, sure, no problem, if you sell me your birthright. So the Torah says that, he says that Esau goes through a thought process, and he says, look, I'm going to die. What use is it to me? And the Torah then almost criticizes Esau and says that like he spurned the birthright. What's going on here, right? Let's step back. What's the birthright? The birthright came with certain things. It came with, he was going to get the blessings from his father, but it was also came with the responsibility of working in the temple. Right? The original plan was that the oldest of each family would work in the temple. Right? So Esau, as the oldest, it came with that responsibility to work in the temple. Why did Esau say it? He said to himself, I'm going to die because of it. What does it mean? He said to himself, look, I understand that working in the temple comes with a big responsibility. And if I mess up, I could die because of my sins. And he's like, I don't want that responsibility.
He's playing it safe.
He's playing it safe, right? So the question now, like, it seems like he was afraid of the responsibility. Sometimes someone asks you to do something, right? Like, there's a big event and someone says to you, do you want to speak in front of everyone? And you're like, no thanks. What's going through your head is like, I'm afraid I'm going to mess up, right? Is it such a bad thing that he's afraid that he's going to mess up? Why is the Torah criticizing him? The Torah says that he spurned the birthright, right? Like he dismissed it. He didn't value it. Why is it saying that? Why doesn't it just say, here's a person who's afraid? Why is the Torah criticizing him?
Well, Hashem wants us to be big. He just said, I want to be small, it's safer. It's such an honor.
Yes, and I want to dig a little bit deeper in there, because why does Hashem want us to be big, right? Like, Hashem gives us the fear as well. It's a very normal human reaction, right? We have it in multiple areas in our life. Can anyone here think of a time where you were asked to do something and maybe it was a good thing and you felt afraid?
Many,
right? I remember years ago when I was living in Calgary, I was asked to give a parenting course, and at the time I was like a parent of like 2 little kids, and I advertised it, and then I was like, no, I'm not doing this. Like, who am I to start talking about it, right? What was it that stopped me? It was fear. It was, like, I'm going to mess up. People aren't going to respect me for what I have to say because of what the stage of life I'm in. Fear is very understandable. Why is the Torah like? And the language of the Torah is strange. It's telling us he belittled the birthright. Why doesn't it just say, oh, he was afraid of it? Why is he saying it? He belittled it. It is true that he could have messed up and he could have lost his life over it. But so here's the problem with his fear. When it says that he belittled it, it's right, because yes, fear is a barrier that stops us from doing things. But when do we overcome that barrier of fear? Let's say you have someone who's afraid of flying. What might convince them to get on a plane?
Some type of big motivation.
What sort of motivation?
What's on the other side?
What's on the other side is worth it. Yeah, exactly. So when a person gives into their fear, what they're really saying, subconsciously or consciously, is that what's on the other side isn't worth it. What's on the other side of fear isn't valuable enough for me to be able to risk overcoming that fear, right? Like, you can have someone who's very afraid of traveling, for example, right? But if there's grandkids they want to see, then maybe they'll get on they'll travel because it's worthwhile for them.
They'll find somebody to drive.
When the Torah says that he belittled the birthright, the Torah is saying the truth here, because the birthright wasn't worth it for him, right? Esau is a person who takes risks. That's what a hunter does, right? You go out there and you hunt animals, you're putting yourself in danger's way. But that was worthwhile for him. What he was really saying here was, I'm afraid that I'm going to die, and it's not worth it for me. Right? It's not valuable enough for me, because when it's valuable enough for us, we take risks. Mm-hmm. So perhaps it's not just about being more confident and whatever, but it's also about understanding the value of the thing that we're trying to get to. So I'm going to give you another story from the Torah as well. So this is the story of the spies. The Jews came out of Egypt. They were heading towards Israel. They turned around to Moses and they said, we want to send spies to the land of Israel. We know that God has told us that the land of Israel is valuable and important to us, and it's going to be great. But we want to know for ourselves. So we want to send spies. They were criticized for that decision. Any ideas why they were criticized for that?
Because they were negative.
even before they were
They
negative.
didn't trust that it was going to be fine.
They didn't trust, right? They should have had faith because they knew that God took them out of Egypt. And they should have had trust that God was going to take them into Israel and that what God was saying, that this land is going to be good for you, was right. But they failed on that. And they said, we want to send spies into the land of Israel. So what happens is the spies come back and they cry and they're weeping. Why did they come back with such a negative report? What was behind that negativity? They came to the land of Israel and they saw giants and they saw giant fruits and they saw this. It was a different land. And what was their emotional reaction to that?
They felt like grasshoppers.
The language that it says is that in our eyes we seemed like grasshoppers before them. Why were they punished so greatly? Fear is such a normal, emotional, human reaction to something that is strange and unusual. Why are they being punished of it? And it's interesting, the wording of that they used of in our eyes we seem like grasshoppers. It doesn't even seem that their fear was that we Hashem's not going to be able to do it. What was the fear?
They were too weak.
We're too small. Right? They looked at them, they looked at these giants around them, and they looked at this magnificent land, and they looked at themselves, and they're like, we're too small.
If they really believed in God,
Yeah.
then they shouldn't feel that way because He's putting them in that situation. He's going to take care of them.
And he's been taking care of them all the
way through Egypt.
Is it a test that we can relate to just by a moment? That we ever feel like something that God sends us that we're not cut out for? Yes, I see some nods around the table. Sometimes it can be a challenge that God sends us and we are like, I'm not cut out for this, or sometimes it could be a mitzvah that we have an opportunity to do and we kind of turn it down because we feel like too small, right? Now, what's the problem with that? What's the problem with feeling they were punished for it? They were taken to task for it. If it's just a problem that they didn't have confidence, we look at people that don't have confidence and you can feel sorry for them. But here they were kind of taken to task for it. Why? Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says this. He says that on the day that you were created, that was the day that Hashem decided that the world needs you, right? Go further and say that every single day that you wake up is the day that Hashem decided that the world needs you. And the problem with the Meraglim, the problem with the spies, is that they didn't recognize their own worth. And we as people, we sometimes fall into this trap as well. We like, I can't do that, or like, I'm not great enough to do it. That's for religious people. That's for holy people. That's for, that's for someone else too. That's for people that have a lot of faith and trust. But that's not for me. But that's a failing on our part. And it's interesting that we talk about confidence as though something that you have or you don't have, but confidence is actually something that we build. We build. How do we build confidence? We build it by doing the things, right? So we have to have that faith that, yes, I can do it because Hashem put me in this world and God put me here for a purpose and I am big enough, right? The failing of the Meraglim at the core of it, which incidentally, the failing of the Meraglim is not just the spies, it's not just something that happened then. Does anyone know what day they got back from Israel? And they gave their reports to the Jewish people? It was the 9th of Av, right? The 9th of Av is Tisha B'Av, is the end of the 3 weeks, which is that's the day that the Jewish people cried. They spent the whole night crying. And God said, you cried for no reason, I'm going to give you reasons to cry, right? And that becomes the day that the temples are destroyed and many other Jewish tragedies happen. And if we think that, why are we being punished for something that happened so long ago? I think this is at the core so often of what our feelings are, right? Like we don't value ourselves enough. We think small, right? And part of what the Meraglim was saying as well was that they were worried about in their eyes we seem like grasshoppers, right? They were projecting upon other people what they thought of them. Again, I think we sometimes do that, right? Like if I take on this mitzvah, for example, what are other people going to say? This is a conversation that we had on Wednesday night, right? Like, if I'm the one that doesn't participate in the office gossip, what are my coworkers going to think of me, right? Are they going to think I'm snobby? Or we project on what other people are thinking of us, and it holds us back. And if we go back to when we're really doing that, at the core of what we're doing is we're showing that we don't value it enough, right? If we really understood, for example, how damaging gossip was, I would be willing to suffer the perhaps being seen as an outsider, right? So that I don't participate in it. When we value the thing enough, we're willing to put ourselves through the discomfort of having that fear. So I think what these two stories show us, that fear often is when we give in to fear, it's because we don't value the thing enough, right? We don't recognize the value of it. And sometimes we don't recognize the value of ourselves, right? If we recognize the value of ourselves, who am I to start gossiping? When we bring it back to our regular fears, right? Like our day-to-day fears, oftentimes what pushes us to overcome that fear is because we value something more. And it's interesting to, I think, notice that what can help us overcome that fear is because we value something more. And I think where this shows up a lot of times in our life is the fear of the unknown, right? Someone asks me to do something that's important or valuable, and I'm like, no, I don't know how much of a commitment it's going to take from my life, or I don't know how it's going to impact how people see me, or I don't know how it's going to impact it. But when we value that thing, right, whatever that thing is, right, in Esau's case, he didn't value a spiritual life. Right? For him, it wasn't valuable. So why should I risk my life for it? He valued the hunt and the adrenaline that he got from the hunt, whatever else he got it. Therefore, it was worthwhile risking his life for that. For this, he didn't value it enough. The Jews in the thing, they didn't value themselves enough. Right? So maybe they could see that Israel was a special land or whatever, but they didn't value, and there's ways to understand the story and what does it mean they didn't value, but they didn't value that they could live in that land, right? They didn't value themselves enough. Sometimes the challenge is we don't value ourselves enough. I think in both of these situations, why they were criticized for their fear is because the fact that they feared showed their lack of value for something else. It wasn't just the fear that itself, but it's how we react to the fear. And the fact that Esau said, you know what, I'm going to let the fear win, shows that he didn't value. And that's why the Torah calls him for it. It says he belittles it, right? You belittled the birthright. And he didn't value, right? Otherwise he would have said, you know what, it's worthwhile for me to take the risk that I'm going to mess up in order to have a spiritual life. And the same thing with the Moabim, the spies, they didn't value themselves. So when it came to coming to the land of Israel, they thought, we're not capable of this. We're not going to be able to do it. And yet that was unfounded, because if God was putting them in that situation, then they had the capabilities to do it. If God is giving us a situation, of God is giving us an opportunity, then we have the capabilities to do it. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy or fun, right? It could be very hard. It could be a challenge, but it means that we have that capabilities to do it. And I think it's important for us to understand that if we want to grow in life, we have to be willing to take a risk. And it goes back to everything. It goes back to what we started with in the beginning with those uncomfortable conversations. If we want to grow our relationships, we want to grow ourselves, we have to be willing to take a risk of what's going to happen if we have that uncomfortable conversation. If we want to grow ourselves spiritually, we have to be willing to take a risk.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your feedback, and if you enjoyed this episode, you'll love my book, Living Beautifully: How to Bring Meaning, Joy, and Love into Your Life, based on the timeless wisdom of Pirkei Avot. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Have a wonderful day.